Good afternoon, John Wirtz here. We're here with Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. He's a candidate for governor. It's December 20th of 2021, 2 p.m. With me is Bob Bagley, Del Fessenden, DJ Fike, Pat, and Dennis Tibbs. Colonel, welcome.
It's good to be back with you all.
Yeah,
and
great
if
to
we keep
have you.
meeting like this, what are the neighbors going to think?
Yeah, exactly right.
We're
Thanks
gonna have to
for,
come to your house in Austin when.
No, it's
It's
not
in
my
Dallas.
house. That's the people's house.
You're
oh, there you go.
I always remember that.
Well, thank you for coming in. And as we discussed, if you'd like to take up to 5 minutes for your opening, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, it's again a pleasure and an honor to be here with each and every one of you. And of course, you know, we've done this quite a few times, you know, for the chairman's race. Of course, been here speaking with you all quite a few times. And I look forward to being with you all tonight for your holiday party. I think everyone knows who I am and what I stand for, and the bottom line is to preserve and protect the sovereignty of the state of Texas and constitutional conservative principles and values. And what do I mean by constitutional conservative principles and values? That means that the right and respect of individual rights, freedom, and liberty. That means that we have to make sure that we protect our traditional nuclear families. That means that we have to protect and make sure that we have good, strong systems of education, not indoctrination, so that we have equality of opportunity and not equality of outcomes, which is sadly what our institutions of quote-unquote learning have become. I think it's important that we protect our small business entrepreneurs because small businesses are the 75 to 80% of our economy. And what we saw happen during the COVID year, where we saw 2.7 million Texans and close to 10,000 small businesses, they're gone, bankrupt, never be back. We don't want to see that happen again. I don't believe that anyone, elected official, has the enumerated power to decide who or what is essential. And that means that you don't sit up and you try to lead, or not lead, but rule over people by edicts, orders, mandates, and decrees. We live in a constitutional republic, and that means you're supposed to govern by the rule of law. And without a doubt, when we talk about protecting the sovereignty, Texas has a 1,254-mile border that is porous, it's wide open, and it is affecting us all across the state of Texas and, of course, the United States of America. And you all know, living here in the Houston area, Houston and Dallas are the top two cities in the country for sex trafficking. And you're on a major thoroughfare here, and we know the human trafficking is bad, the drug trafficking is bad, so we got to take some very dedicated actions to make sure that we are doing what is right to protect our borders, especially since you have a federal government that has not done it. And I think it's time for us to move away from the political optics and the quote-unquote panacea of a wall being the end all. There are some serious things we need to do about it. So with that being said, I look forward to taking your questions.
All right, thank you very much. You mentioned how many businesses had gone out?
Close to 10,000 businesses here in the state of Texas have gone bankrupt. And as a matter of fact, when you go down to Austin, Texas, and you go down 6th Street, I mean, it is a shell of itself. And that used to be the live music capital of the world, but that's not the case anymore.
Wow, huh. Because I heard at one time we led the country in business closures from that standpoint.
Business
So that's-
bankruptcies, Texas was the lead on that.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for that. And thank you for your service
My pleasure.
to our country, continuing. The kind of jump right into it. I know a lot of people have asked and wondered. You were chairman of the RPT, Republican Party of Texas, for a year, and were there 6 months from the time you were in there to, when you jumped in the race. When you jumped in the governor's race, what prodded you to make that leap? Some people think, well, it was just a stepping stone. And can you address that?
I'm a soldier. Soldiers don't do stepping stones. Soldiers answer the call of service. And so when I saw what happened in 2018 and how close we were to losing Texas, and when we saw 12 state house seats we lost, 2 state senate seats we lost, 2 congressional districts we lost, 56 judicial positions we lost, mainly between Dallas and Houston. Now we start to see why judicial positions are so important. And so that's why people ask me to run for state party chairman. I mean, I live in a district that was lost, a congressional district, but the fight for America is not in Washington, D.C. The fight for America is here in Texas. And so as the chairman of the Republican Party of Texas, and we had an incredible, successful tenure year.
Yeah, I'm going to try to grab that music right now.
Okay. Bob?
Well, I hadn't finished.
Oh, go ahead,
The
I'm
music
sorry.
was going, so I.
Yeah, no,
you
we're
couldn't
trying to
hear
get
me.
that turned down. Sorry about that.
So I would say that the thing that I saw as the chairman of the Republican Party of Texas, you all asked me to advocate and make sure that the legislative priorities get passed. And of course, I added a ninth one, which was to curtail executive overreach. Well, guess what happens? The people in Austin, even though you work so hard to get them back in the state House majority and state Senate majorities, they just kind of dismiss you and disregard you. And so as a chairman, you can only advocate for those legislative priorities. But as a governor, you can set the tone, you can set the narrative, you can make sure that those legislative priorities get done so that maybe after 20 years of Republican statewide control in Texas, we can start to get these priorities done, and maybe we don't have to have the same priorities again every single election cycle or every single legislative cycle. So that's why I decided to step down in order to step up.
All right, good deal, thank you. Bob?
As governor, how would you deal with this, the crisis that we have within the military, within even the National Guard, concerning masks and vaccine mandates?
Well, I cannot do anything when it comes to the active duty federal government, that military. But as Commander-in-Chief of the Texas Military Department, as long as our soldiers, sailors, soldiers and airmen are not on Title 10 or Title 32 orders, which are activated orders, then they fall under my command and control. And so there will not be vaccine mandates, there will not be mask mandates or any of these things. And we already see an example of that in the state of Oklahoma, where Governor Stitt has said, my troops are not on active duty orders, and that's not going to happen with them. And that's kind of created a little back and forth with the federal government. But again, we've got to assert state sovereignty and states' rights and understand who does control the respective state National Guard. So that's what I will follow along with.
Okay, thank you.
Bill?
Okay, under the topic of budget, you enumerated several things there. Chapter 313 should be eliminated.
Yes.
Texas Enterprise Fund, et cetera, will be terminated. All funds and entities using taxpayer funds without permission will be terminated. Those are nice sayings. I'm wondering how many of those things are within purview of the executive branch of the Texas government versus how many of those would require legislative approval. And what is your approach to get that legislative approval? I'm assuming that you're not going to issue executive orders.
No, you're not, and you have to go through a budgetary process. Now, the Texas Enterprise Fund is a slush fund that the governor created, so I will just end that slush fund. But when you talk about a budget, I will go to the legislature, and in 2023, you stand up and you give the state address. That's when I'll present my budget. And I will, challenge anybody in the House and the Senate to come up with a better budget, because it's going to be a budget based upon looking at where we can reduce the inefficiencies and ineffectiveness of the state agencies. And you, as I said in the survey, you go back and look at the Texas Sunset Advisory Commission and see how many of these programs and agencies that have been recommended for sunsetting have not been. And so that's a great point to start off on. And again, it comes back to setting that narrative. So if you say that this is your priority as the governor, that's what you want to see happen, and we will do the comparative analysis between the respective budgets that come out of the Senate and also the House, but then also I sit on the Legislative Budget Board. So I think we can do a lot of influence and impact there with the Legislative Budget Board, where you have the President of the Senate, which is the Lieutenant Governor. You also have the Speaker of the House. So I think, again, it's about the influence of saying that these are the things that we want to do to make sure that we are getting more money to the pockets of the Texas taxpayer instead of the pockets of Austin. And the other thing I talked about is that we've got to move away from a baseline budget system to a zero-based budget system, because a baseline budget system means every budget cycle you start from a previous baseline, and when they talk about cutting spending, that's only a cut to the increase of the spending. They're still going to increase off of that. We got to go back to zero-based. So every single agency program, whatever, needs to verify whether they should be refunded again.
Okay. I have a follow-on question to that, but I don't think I have time. So, DJ?
Well, I was going to stick with that same theme about the taxes. Just to layperson here, what is chapter 313?
Chapter 313 is the means by which we funnel money to subsidize wind and solar through our independent school districts. Now, what the politicians there in Austin, Texas will tell you that we've suspended that, or it's not active right now, but we need to just flat out kill it. And I think coming back to what we saw happen with the freeze this past February, we are subsidizing and putting an over-reliance in an energy source that is not really reliable. So 23 to 26% is what we currently have for wind and solar. But we saw how they failed us in February when it went from 23% down to 3% on that Valentine's Day of February. And so again, we need to make sure, I believe in the free market. And I believe that if you want to compete in the free market, you need to be able to compete in the free market and not be heavily subsidized, especially through our independent school districts.
Okay. Still dealing with taxes, how would you, as governor, help eliminate property tax, or would you?
I would.
And how to get us back to I believe the Constitution requires a balanced budget in Texas?
Oh, sure. Well, I think that's one of the things when you go back to having a zero-based budget where everything has to be justified. And if you look over the past 8 years or so, I mean, you've seen the Texas state budget continually increase. And why is it continually increasing? Is it making the lives of the citizens better? I would say probably not. And so when you look at our property tax system, which is Marxist in nature, number one, it's a progressive tax. Number two, it eliminates private property ownership. We've got to move away from that. And so how did we do taxation in the United States of America prior to 1917 when we created the personal income tax? Everything was consumption-based. And so I think that Texas is a great place that we can look at implementing what today we call a fair tax. Got to make sure it's not too overly regressive on the lower income levels. But that means we don't have an income tax, which is constitutional, and we still make sure that we move away from property taxes, but it's based upon what you are buying, and that's why I think consumption-based tax is a great avenue to look at, moving away from the property tax system right now.
You know, most of us probably don't really know what Sunset Commission does, but from the word, you would think that it's a group of people that look at an agency, and if they're not spending the money right, it does away with it. But when I looked at the report for the SJRA wrote their Sunset Review. And they said, everything's pretty good. And that's what the Sunset Review Committee said. We'll come back in a couple of years and look at you again. So how's that supposed to work, and have they been successful with other agencies?
Well, I had the honor of sitting on the Sunset Advisory Commission in 2016. And I saw exactly what you're talking about. We sit there and we have these agencies come forward and we, do all the background research and everything. We scrutinize them. The actual commission comes with their recommendations after looking at these agencies. But what happens is the Sunset Advisory Commission packages everything, and then it goes to the legislature, and it's supposed to be voted on in the next legislative session. The Advisory Commission meets the off years from the legislative session. And what do a lot of these legislators end up doing? Just pushing it to the side. Because this is in my district, I don't want it to go away, It's the same as you see up at the federal government. Well, I want this plant or this factory to stay, or I want this base to stay because it's in my district. And so what I think that I need to do is go back the past 15 to 20 years and look at those recommendations, look at those agencies, look at those programs, and challenge and say, this has to go away. This is what the commission recommended. I don't know why you guys did not vote for it in legislative session. I continue to understand why you wouldn't. But we've got to do what is right by the taxpayer. And so that's part of the budget. And I think that one of the key things is that you put people on defense. One of the great scenes I remember, I don't know if y'all saw the movie Dave, when he sat down with his accountant, Charles Grodin, overnight, and they went through the budget of the federal government, and then the next day at the staff meeting, to the surprise of the chief of staff, they went over the budget, and he had them on camera. And he said, why do we have this program? And the head of the agency couldn't answer, and it went away. And so that's what we need to do. I don't think we do a good job of challenging people.
Okay.
In question number 3 under the general category, and I won't do the whole thing, just one sentence. How does the governor justify allowing the legislature to ignore the mutilation of our children? And you replied in part of your answer, I will not be bought off by special interests such as in the case with our current governor. Can you explain?
Well, it's very simple. You
Elaborate
go
on
back and you look at the finance reports, and you will see that the governor, the lieutenant governor, and also the Speaker of the House, as well as Stephanie Click, who was the head of the House committee that oversaw that issue of ending child gender modification, they got hundreds of thousands of dollars from, I think it was UT Southwestern, which has a child gender modification clinic. This is one of the fastest growing sectors in our public clinics here in the state of Texas. I think 16, 17 have opened up in the past year. And so the age-old adage in politics, as I tell people, you follow the money. And so I will not be bought off like that. And I think it is abhorrent that we are chemically and physically castrating children in the state of Texas, and that was one of our legislative priorities. You had a piece of legislation in the House and the Senate that Republicans killed. And so, again, coming back to the very first question you asked me, why would you step down from being the chairman to step up to run for governor? That's one of the main issues. If we're saying that this is a legislative priority and Republicans have worked hard to get you elected in these positions, and you basically just tell them, go sit in the corner, we're not going to do it, something has to change.
And what was the name of that, getting to Southwest?
UT Southwestern.
UT Southwest, okay.
UT Southwestern.
UT Southwestern.
Yeah, but
that's-
I mean, you can Google that, and there was a report done, which I think the governor had gotten close to $800,000, and lieutenant governor got another $300,000-$400,000. It was a big chunk of change.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
Go back into, speaking of Sunset, one of the, in dealing with foster care, with homeless children, with sex trafficking.
Yes.
They're all tied in together, and a lot of it is through CPS.
Yeah.
And we've asked for CPS to be sunsetted and to be started anew. Are you aware of any of this?
Oh,
And what would you
absolutely.
do?
Totally aware. Well, the first thing you do is the person that's in charge of CPS, you get rid of. There are many agencies. I mean, the Texas Education Association, the Medical Board, the Pharmacy Board, Nursing Board, DPS. The heads of all those agencies will be getting new positions if I'm coming in as governor, because I'm not pleased with what I've seen coming out of those agencies. So you have to change the leadership, and that's how people see how serious you are. And this is a big deal because, from what I've read and seen, the Texas CPS, they are connected and linked to sex trafficking. They're losing kids into the system, and that system is sex trafficking, and that should not happen. Our kids are a precious resource. When you look at the fact that we have closed down many facilities, so now we are 2,100 beds short for these kids, and so what are we doing? We just put them out there into the streets. That's unacceptable for me. So yes, we have to look at how do we reshape, understand the mission, the task and purpose of that agency, and make sure that they're protecting our children.
We just had a friend that had their business shut down. They shut it down because of the constant harassment from CPS and the hoops that they had to jump through, rather than being concerned with the treatment of the kids that were there, that were placed in there.
And that's a recurring situation. A lot of people say that CPS just harasses them, and they are removing kids on rumor and innuendo and things of that nature. That should not happen.
I have read that even though Texas is required to have a balanced budget, that there's one area that seems to be ignored, and that is what this article said was underfunded obligations. For
Oh,
instance,
yeah.
retirement systems
Yes,
and
sir.
so forth, health systems and things. How did it get that way? How would you approach solving it?
Well, let's see, Truth in Accounting, that's the organization that's been going out and auditing the books there, and they've seen some very interesting gimmicks in the accounting processes. And what you're talking about is unfunded mandates and liabilities. The exact same thing with the federal government. The actual debt of the United States federal government is not the 29 to 30 trillion dollars. It's more like $130 or so trillion because they're not taking into account the Social Security, the Medicaid, Medicare, I'm sorry, and also the net interest on the debt. And so the same thing here is that people are coming back and saying our budget is balanced, but they're not looking at the pension plans and all of these things that go into it. So that's one of the reasons why I say you have to have a good, strong person that understands accounting. You got to work with the comptroller and say, let's really look at the budget to include those unfunded mandates and liabilities, and how do we create the savings in what we're doing as far as our spending, so that we can account for all of our outlays like that has to occur. So I don't know how we got into this situation, but Texas is about $107 billion in debt.
So do you view Glenn Hagar as the comptroller as a friendly associate in addressing that with you, or is he part of the problem?
Well, I will tell you this, what I've heard from some people is that the governor does not have staff meetings. And as a commander in the military, if I try to lead my unit and never had a staff meeting, we're going to fail. And so I think it's so important that you bring everyone in, not every week, but definitely twice a month. And you have staff meetings, and you look at all of these things, you talk about these issues, and you get reports back on these things to see the progress. And so I have never really sat down and had a conversation with the comptroller of Texas, Mr. Hagar, but I think that as governor, I will give him a task and give him a purpose, and I will hold him to standard on that.
Okay, sounds good. And with what time? I don't have that. DJ.
Texas, my state,
Yes, ma'am, mine too.
we should be leading the nation
I agree.
in all this stuff that's coming out of the federal government and assaulting our freedoms. How would you do that?
I'd just be myself. I mean, I don't know any better way to explain it. I took an oath to the Constitution of the United States of America as a young lieutenant in 31 July 1982, and that's what I'm going to continue to honor and understand that the Constitution is a restraining document on the federal government. And the last amendment in the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, is the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment says all those powers not delegated to the federal government are reserved to the states and to the people. So you've got to have strong gubernatorial leadership that stands up. And I will tell you that after I retired from the Army out at Fort Hood, Texas, I asked my wife where you wanted to go. And so we lived in South Florida for 10 years. And in 2014, we had the chance to come back here. I'm tired of the folks that we know from Florida calling and telling us how great Ron DeSantis is. I think that Texas should be leading. Before I came over here, I did a little historical narration of Washington on the Brazos. Texas is the only state in the United States of America that has its own Declaration of Independence. The only state that fought for its independence by itself. Texas should be leading in all of these issues, and people are looking for Texas to do that. Not to be leading in, child gender modification surgeries, not to be leading in human trafficking and sex trafficking, not to be leading in the amount of business bankruptcies that we have. But when you don't have the adequate type of principled leadership, this is where you are. So I'm just going to be the principled constitutional conservative fellow that you all know that I am.
Okay.
Just a clarification on that $107 billion, you're talking about state and local debt?
No, state.
State debt?
Yes. Truth in Accounting is the website, TIA, and they have done a forensic look at the Texas budget and our books, and that's where we are. Because they're not counting for the unfunded mandates and liabilities. So you can come out and say that our budget is balanced, but in truth it's not.
How much state and local debt is there? You have any idea?
You mean local debt? I have no
County
idea.
debt?
No, I mean, there are 254 counties in the state of Texas. That'd be a lot of research.
Probably each got a few $1 billion in debt. Well, you'd mentioned also the fair tax. You're not talking about a fair tax, income tax for Texas, are you?
No, it's a consumption-based tax, and it's based upon what you purchase yourself.
Okay.
Sales tax.
But the fair tax has pretty serious limitations too. It involves issuing a government check to every person on the country as a rebate for taxing their groceries. But we do have Lone Star cards and EBT cards and all those things.
And EBT cards, I mean, think about it. What the EBT card, which was the genesis from the food stamp, because all of a sudden we didn't want people showing food stamps in the grocery line, You're not supposed to be using EBT cards at convenience stores and all these type of things. I mean, you're supposed to go back to the original intent. And so I think that's one of the places that we need to clean up. And I'm sure at the state level, I know you had Commissioner Miller in here, we need to make sure that we're cleaning up those roles, the welfare roles and things of that nature, because you know, people may need a hand up, but they don't need the hand out. And there's a certain point in time when, you know, you've got to cut those benefits off because, or else you're just really economically enslaving people. So it's very important when you talk about a consumption-based tax, we get the right type of economic minds in there to make sure that it is working very well. Like I said, it is not too regressive on lower income tax level people, which is why they talk about giving people a rebate check at that lower income tax level.
Well, you openly see people using EBT type cards for beer, caviar,
Yeah,
T-bones,
strip
things that
clubs.
most people don't buy.
Strip clubs. I
Well,
mean,
yeah.
you can go by any place and you can see EBT cards accepted here.
Even beyond the elected officials. That's a good word. So would you support restrictions that would limit merchants from taking those things on?
Absolutely.
Anything but beans and rice?
It has to go back to the original intent. What was the original intent of that food program? Was for low-income individuals to be able to get good, healthy, quality foods, American-made foods from grocery stores. We've gotten so far away
Oh,
from
yeah.
that.
Okay.
Can I tack on to that?
Yes, sir.
Why can't we just go back to the subsidies that used to be given? The cheese, the peanut butter, the powdered milk, or whatever.
Or MREs. We're good on meat. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, folks. I'm not going to make people eat MREs.
MREs are pretty good these
We
days.
require our troops to eat them.
Yeah.
It's good enough for them. It should be good
Yeah,
enough for
well,
people.
you know,
right.
and when you become a member of the military, you also, you know, sign away a lot of your liberties when you're under Uniform Code of Military Justice. So.
You get Tabasco sauce with your meals.
Used to, every meal.
No,
So-
they still get Tabasco
Really?
sauce.
Under the
Unless we
civil,
digress.
under the civil liberty category, the question is, do you support a full forensic election audit in Texas? Why or why not? You said
say
yes. Why? And do you think there was corruption in our election process? And if so, where? Was it the technology, the process, the people?
All three. The technology with, you know, the machines, and I think that this is where we need to have strong leadership in the Secretary of State's office. That should be out there doing exactly what y'all doing with me. You should be vetting the machines and say, here's the approved list of machines that we will have here in the state of Texas, and here are the things that those machines cannot do. They cannot be hooked to the internet. There needs to have an auditable paper trail with these machines. And if you don't do that, that's a violation, and you would be fined, and you could be in prison for that. I think the other thing to happen is about the people and the process. You know, right down the road in Harris County, the former county clerk there, Chris Hollins, should be in jail. I mean, Chris Hollins wanted to send out 2.7 million unsolicited ballots. And first of all, we need to get rid of this whole thing about mail-in ballots. You know, there's absentee balloting or there's in-person balloting. That's it. And absentee balloting is a controlled process where you have to send in an application. But when you start talking about just mailing out ballots on a voter registration list that hasn't been scrubbed or whatever, then you get into the corrupt actions. And the other thing that Mr. Hollins tried to do down the road was curbside voting. The curbside voting locations that he opened up in 9 Democrat precincts. That's a violation of Texas election law. He should be in jail. Now, the thing that concerns me is SB 1 was signed by the governor, but yet on page 72 and 73, it took voter fraud from being a felony offense down to a misdemeanor offense. And as far as I know, they have not come back and corrected that. And the governor said that he didn't realize it was in the bill. Well, then why did you sign it? Someone obviously didn't read it. So I promise you that before I put my signature on it, I will make sure that I have read the bills, the staff has read the bills, because sometimes other people may see something you don't see. So I think that we can have all of these laws on the books, but if there are no consequences, this is what you get. Or if the consequences are so minuscule, people will roll the dice and say, sure, I'll take a misdemeanor, but I'll still go out there and do it. You cannot have judges, secretaries of state, or governors change an election law. But unfortunately, here in Texas, even our own governor, he changed the election law, which is way outside the lines according to the Texas State Constitution.
Okay, Bob.
I don't remember what publication it was, whether it was Texas Tribune or just something that was done. There was the three candidates that are running against the governor were asked a number of questions, and one was on abortion. And your answer was that you believed that it was okay for abortion to be for incest and rape. And is that still your position?
Let me explain personally how I feel on that issue. Because you will not find anyone that has been out there fighting for the life issue probably harder than myself. Planned Parenthood and Code Pink made me top of the list when I was a member of Congress. I have 2 daughters, and if my daughters, their body is criminally violated, I have a hard time believing that the government should mandate to them what happens with their body. I think that really does come down to a God and family decision. That's why we need to make sure that we have strong Judeo-Christian faith values in our society so that young women can make the right decision in that case. And I believe that my daughters would make the right decision. So that's my point, personally, as a dad of 2 daughters. How would I govern? If the people in the state of Texas, and it gets passed through the House and it gets passed through the Senate, it comes to me, I'm not going to stand in the way of the will of the people in the state of Texas. I want to see Planned Parenthood closed. You know, the beginning of this year in January, I was out there in Lubbock for the March for Life, supporting them so that Lubbock could become the largest sanctuary city for life in the country. And so I've always been out there. You can talk to Involved for Life, the Downtown Pregnancy Center in Dallas, Woman to Woman, Pro-Life Mississippi, Family Policy Centers in Nebraska, Illinois, and also Washington State, CareNet Pregnancy Centers of New Mexico. I've been all over the country speaking about pro-life. But I will just be honest with you because I think that that's what the difference between a politician and a statesman. I'm not just going to sit here and tell you what I think you want to hear in order to get your endorsement. I'm going to tell you how I think and how I believe, and hopefully you can respect me for that. But I just laid out how I would govern, which means that if it's the will of the people that elected me to be in a position to govern, then so be it.
So then you're still okay with killing a baby if it was rape or incest?
I'm not okay with killing a baby because it's rape or incest.
Well,
Okay?
that's basically what you said.
No, it's not. I believe that this is something that a family with God has to sit down and make a determination on. And it's just the same as nobody here wants to see the government tell you what you get injected into your body.
I understand that.
So if if a woman's body is criminally violated, I think that's something where that's a very emotional issue.
It is.
And I think that's where God and family have to come in.
Okay, you made reference earlier to some people heading various agencies and so forth who might need to find new jobs when you become governor. Appointments is a big, big thing that the governor does. It's usually not headlines. But so do you already have some people in mind to fill those various positions? And especially with respect to the turnover and some of the controversy with respect to recent secretaries of state.
Well, I will tell you that if we are successful coming through the primary or a runoff, then that's exactly what you do. You set up a transition office, if you want to call it that starts looking at people and you start saying these are the agencies where I want to change out. But then you also have to look at the second and third, maybe even the fourth levels thereof. And I think that's one of the problems that President Trump didn't do very well. Not just changing out the head of these agencies, but look at the second and third and fourth levels as well, because the deep state part of it, I call it the bureaucratic administrative state. And so that's something that you have to really dedicated sit down. Am I looking at that, right now? No, but I know the agencies that have to be reformed and have to have better leadership. And so those will be on the top of the list, and we'll start getting at that, because I believe that once you're elected and you're ready to go, you're supposed to have a battle plan ready to execute.
Okay, and on a slightly different topic, you also referenced earlier legislative priorities. Do you have a list that you would have ready for 2023 yet?
Yeah, I just asked the chairman of the Republican Party of Texas what their legislative priorities are. That's where you start from. I mean, and again, this is not about my agenda. This is not about what I want to do. It's about what is right for the people of Texas. It's about governing as a constitutional conservative and honoring the people that voted you into that position. So that's where you start from. Those are your first main priorities. And then we'll look and see what are the other critical things, like the budget or, some of these other things that need to get done.
So you're in full agreement with referring back to the previous, the 9 priorities there?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I advocated for as the chairman.
Okay, and one of those, just to remind you, was the abolition of abortion in Texas.
And I just said that it's not my will, it's the will of the people.
Okay.
But I have to be honest with you and tell you how I feel as Lieutenant Colonel Aaron West.
Yes, sir. Jay?
Earlier, when we first got started, we referred to the Capitol as the people's house. And the people should have access to that house,
Correct,
all chambers.
correct.
So I believe recently when they had this COVID madness going on in full force, the people were not allowed to go into the house. How do you feel about that? And is there anything as a governor that your office could do to prevent people from being barred from the house?
No government agency, building, or whatever should be restricted from the people being able to go there because they exist because of your taxpayer funds. But we have to make sure that we are providing the right type of protections, of course. But we should never say that you cannot come in or you must have this done. We can make the recommendations, but we're never going to shut down the access of the people of Texas to their government because that's not transparency.
And I had another question, I can't think of it.
If we believe the news, our border wall is back under construction again. And-
Yeah, 1.7 miles out of 1,254 miles. I mean, you do the math.
Well, a little bit, yeah. And also, if we understand what they're saying, we're using the same materials and the same contractors that President Trump used on his wall, while other stuff that the taxpayers have paid for is laying on the ground rusting. So is there, if you're a governor, is there somebody you can call in Washington, or the people that own that stuff, or can we condemn that stuff? Or is there some way we can bring a little common sense into not buying new material when
Sure.
similar materials laying there waiting to be used?
Well, first and foremost, having been a member of Congress, when something is signed and it's appropriated money, it's law. And so a president cannot come along and say, I'm doing an executive order and I'm going to end this. That's unconstitutional. And that's why you have to have strong leadership to say, you really can't do that. Okay, you can go back and now you can take this back through the House and back through the Senate and you can not, have this appropriation, but you just cannot end it. So this has been appropriated for, contracts have been letted out, and you cannot implement an open borders agenda by executive action, which is exactly what has happened. And I think that we need to have the leadership that stands up and affirms that to the federal government. There's a thing in the Constitution called the Supremacy Clause. And the only way that the federal government is supreme over the states is if they're doing things that are pursuant thereof to the Constitution. Two very important words. Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution is the guarantee clause. Two things that the federal government is supposed to guarantee that every state in the union, a Republican form of government, and protect every state from invasion. So they're already violating the Constitution. And so I would, without a doubt, find out where the material is, who are the contractors, who pretty much already had the contract signed and the money's been let to them, and just continue on with the construction. Now, don't think that you don't need a 1,254 mile wall. You need to be able to have a physical barrier, an obstacle in areas where it makes sense, like out in West Texas, along Brewster County, in that area. But in certain areas along the Rio Grande River, it's a floodplain. They're not going to put a wall in a floodplain. And so that's how we have to be smart. And the great thing about that, if you put it in the right places, then you channel people into a place where you have better ability with ground surveillance and ground troops to be able to interdict the infiltration come across your border. So we're talking about a system. And having been on borders before in the military, Iraq and Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, I kind of understand how that should be done.
Well, do those companies that have contracts have some legal right to challenge being shut down?
Of course they do.
Have they
But
done that?
I couldn't answer that.
Okay.
The fence that he's constructing, rumor has it, is that it's not a wall like Trump was constructing, but a chain link fence.
Well, that is what he is now doing, what the governor is now doing is something that resembles what President Trump has done. But remember that 1,254 miles, Trump's wall is only 145 miles. And what Governor Abbott is talking about is 1.7 miles. You know, that's like 1,100 miles you still gotta go.
Right.
So what, Governor Abbott has done, and just really the Del Rio sector, Val Verde County, he just put up a chain link fence. Chain link fence is not gonna stop anybody. As a matter of fact, you see places where people are already chopped holes right through it. So we've got to be serious about this. We are misusing our Texas Military Department. We're sending young men and young women down there. First and foremost, some of them don't even have a weapon. And those that do have a weapon don't have enough ammunition. And on top of that, we have the cartels, which I would designate as a terrorist organization. They're firing across the Rio Grande River into Texas. That's an act of war. But we're not doing anything about it. What we're telling our young men and women to do is to not return fire. And I've been in firefights before. You don't tell people not to shoot if you're being shot at. Someone's going to lose their life. And that time is coming because you're emboldening the other side.
Absolutely. How much time do you
It's 3, 2, 1.
got? Go ahead and I'll catch them on that.
We were down there on the border together, and one boat cruised up one time while we were there, but one of the Mexican helicopters came across into the United States with their 50 cals out both sides of the helicopter, and we did absolutely nothing. After that, I was down there, and our guard was actually helping them out of the boats, crossing the river with their M4s, no magazines in their weapons, no ammunition.
Not in uniform.
No, they were in uniform.
Well, now, when I say in uniform, that means you got your body armor,
Oh, they had no
you got
body,
your helmet
they had no
on.
body armor.
Yeah.
They had nothing.
Yeah.
And even if they were fired upon, they were told to take cover underneath the one Humvee that was there, and that was it. That's putting our people in harm's way. It's ludicrous, and the governor has done nothing about it. Along with that, if I'm not mistaken, we had, what did he decide we were going to put out? 40 of
Those containers.
the containers to build the wall. Do you see that as anything that could actually work?
You don't seriously asking me that. I mean,
Well, people need to know how you feel about it.
well, this is how I feel about it. It's absurd. It's asinine. It's insidious. Okay, so this is what we're doing. We're playing whack-a-mole. And so what we're going to do is line up a bunch of DPS vehicles, which is maybe, again, a mile wide, and we're going to say that has now stopped illegal immigration. Well, any dumbass will just go around it. And that's exactly what they have done. They are now going into La Jolla. They're going back to McAllen. And so if you put a bunch of freight containers and things like that, and you stack them up high, how wide is that? Maybe a mile or two? You got 1,254 miles of border. Now, when you go out to Brewster County, like I was about a month ago, you talk to people out there, that's where the bad folks are coming across. No one's paying attention to what's going on at Brewster County. The folks in camouflage, the folks in black with backpacks on, because it's wide open. Now that's where you should be putting a border, instead of the political optic of, here I am, I'm going to do a press conference, look at what I'm doing, but it's not rendering any results whatsoever. So it is time that we stop putting a Band-Aid on a sucking chest wound and get very serious about this.
Yep.
Okay, special sessions. A lot of interest in the fourth one. Doesn't look like it's going to happen. Here's some back stories.
The
What
main
would-
reason why they don't want a special session, because as long as they're in session, they can't raise money.
Nonetheless, what would be your criteria for calling a special session?
You're going to stay in session until you get the legislative priorities done.
Okay, that's what I was hoping to hear, but that's good criteria.
Yeah.
Okay, and then a different question. What's the proper role of executive orders? How many would you anticipate issuing?
Executive orders are not meant to be a means by which you rule over people. Executive orders are really meant for the operations of the executive branch. But what we have come to do now is that we don't understand civics. And we think that a governor or president is Pharaoh Ramses in the Ten Commandments. And he can just say, so let it be written, so let it be done. Things have to be done the right way in a republic, which is by the rule of law, which is by the legislative process. And so, no, I'm not going to be sitting up there signing a bunch of executive orders to get what I want done. If I want something done, I've got to convince the people to put pressure on their legislators and do this because I'm talking about their priorities. Now, there are certain things that I can do as the governor, such as executive order. The very first executive order will be to designate the cartels as a transnational narco-criminal terrorist organization. I can do that. And what does that do? That tells everyone in the state that if you are working with these individuals, that's a terrorist order, that's a felony offense. Banks that have their money in them, that's a felony offense. And we're going to freeze those assets and seize those assets because it's a terrorist organization. So that's how you use an executive order to make sure that you're providing the safety and security and protection of the people here in the state of Texas. You don't do an executive order saying that you got to get a shot in the arm or you got to shut down your business, or you don't do an executive order that says that we're going to extend early voting from 2 weeks to 3 weeks. That has to go through the legislative branch.
Okay, thank you.
The federal government is trying to pass, I think it's called HB 1, which would
Yes.
change our election.
HR 1.
HR 1.
HR 1.
That would change election laws and put them in the,
Driver's seat.
which is explicitly unconstitutional.
Yes, ma'am.
So how would Texas fight that?
Once again, you do what is called constitutional nullification, which if something is not pursuant thereof to the Constitution, you say we're not going to follow. And so what HR 1 is saying, that there will be no picture ID required to vote. We said in Texas you're going to have picture ID. It says that there will be no voter registration roll review. We're going to do voter registration roll review. It says that from now on, mail-in ballots will be the standard for elections. No, we're still going to have polling locations and we're going to have absentee ballots. And it says that there will be online voter registration. No, you want to register, you got to go and show yourself and show identification. Same-day voter registration, same-day voter. No, we're not going to have that. And what does it also say in HR 1? Illegals will be able to vote. Now, you guys think that's far-fetched. What did Mayor Bill de Blasio just say 2 weeks ago? That illegals will be able to vote in local level elections, and they're already doing that in California. So they're doing the little, crash test dummy things in certain, blue states, and we just have to say no, it's not going to happen. And you have to stand on the Constitution. Because again, free and independent states created these United States of America. That's what it says in the Declaration. And now we're getting to a sense of totalitarianism, authoritarianism, and people that are believing that their ideological agenda has to be what rules the day. And we got to stand up to that.
I have one more question. What is your stand on the Texas House and the Texas Speaker of the House appointing Democrats
Well, I think
to
you guys know what I said. I called the guy a political traitor. Y'all remember that? It was a year ago, and he weren't too happy about it. Why should we allow the folks that we work so hard to not be in leadership of the Texas State House to be in leadership of the Texas State House? And I think you even have Briscoe Cain, who is a local representative here, say, well, we don't want to be like Washington and this is how we do things. How well did that work out when those committee chairmen got on private planes and went to Washington, D.C.? And oh, by the way, they still have those committee chairmanship positions.
Yeah. And there was no consequence.
No consequences, no ramifications. The governor gets up there on Fox News and beats his chest talking about how people are going to get arrested. Show me. What Democrat state representative was arrested? Not one. And that's why the other side does not respect us. Because we do all these pronunciations and things like that, pronouncements, but we never follow through. So I will follow through. And I will tell you, if members of the State House decided to get on planes and fly away and I was the governor, then I make a simple announcement. There are 53 vacated seats in the Texas State House. We're going to have a special election. Because you have just, you're not at your appointed place of duty, and in the Army they call that AWOL. There were ramifications and consequences with being AWOL.
And the Texas Constitution allows for that?
I believe it does. If it doesn't, I'm still going to challenge it and push it because these people have to know that I'm very serious about it. If we have called for a special session and you're not there for the special session, you're saying to the people you don't want to represent them.
Right.
So then you shouldn't represent them.
On day 1 or 2, would you make an order relating to the rules of engagement?
Oh, absolutely.
What would it be, and who would you tell, and who would they tell, and how long would it take to get to the guys with the weapons?
Well, it would happen immediately. But the thing is that when you become the governor, you got to sit down, and that's another person that will be changed out, is the adjutant general of the Texas National Guard, because I want someone that is a war fighter, because we're at war on our board. And so I will ask them, what is the situation? What do you think are the best rules of engagement? And of course, they have a legal advisor, a JAG officer, and we're going to go through that and make sure that we're doing what's right and necessary and proper to protect our men and women that we're deploying down there along that border. And then we're going to go forth with that. And I kind of have some experience with rules of engagement. So we want to make sure, number one, that we protect them. We also want to make sure that we're protecting others so that we don't have someone that, goes off the reservation, as you say, and does something that is completely wrong.
But you do have the authority to say
Absolutely.
soldiers don't have to sit there and take fire.
I am the commander of the Texas Military Department.
And on nullification, has that been done in the last 100 years or so? Have we done it? Have other states done it?
Other states have done it just recently. I believe it was North Dakota, South Dakota just passed constitutional nullification. So a lot has been written about it, and why have we not done it here in the state of Texas, I don't know.
I guess that's what Colorado did on their marijuana.
Basically, and also that would be the state of Washington too, because marijuana is still that's a federal offense. And you cannot join the military if you have been taking marijuana, and you cannot purchase a firearm. Legally, you cannot, because that's one of the questions on the 4475 background check when you go to purchase a weapon.
And who does nullification? Is that a legislative thing?
Yes, that's a legislative thing.
Okay. Well, since I got a second, how did the money going to the enterprise fund get linked up with the school district?
No, that's two totally different things. The Texas Enterprise Fund is a slush fund that the governor has, and he uses that to entice these private corporate businesses to come here to Texas by giving them tax abatements and things of that nature. Now, the other thing, Section 313, is kind of like the shell game of hiding money that ends up being a subsidy over there. And a lot of people don't know about Section 313, not aware about it. And I say we got to stop that. We got to kill it.
Okay.
Time for one last one, Bob.
What is your position on constitutional convention?
The Convention of States.
Yes.
Yeah, Convention of States, Article 5. I've been a wholehearted supporter of that movement for probably like the last 3-4 years. Mark Meckler and I have traveled to many other states. There's a reason why the Founding Fathers put Article 5 in the Constitution, because they knew there would be a time when the federal government would be exactly as we see right now. And so, it's not a constitutional convention. This is a convention of states whereby the states can come together on a singular issue and they can make changes to the Constitution of the United States of America, amendment to the Constitution. 34 states, if they come together and agree, legislative representatives, they can propose an amendment to the Constitution. Still has to be voted on by the United States Congress, the House and the Senate. But if 38 states, high water mark, 38 states can come together, they can actually amend the Constitution. If you read the book by Mark Levin called The Liberty Amendments, he has some recommendations on some of the things that the states need to push on the federal government, such as a balanced budget at the federal government level, such as term limits for members of the House and Senate at the federal government level. But right now, I believe we're at 15 states that have signed on for Convention of States. So we're a long ways away
Thank God.
from even hitting that level of 30.
Do you know who picks the people that will represent Texas?
Well, I don't know who will pick the people.
The Speaker of the House picks
Well.
the state members of the legislature. Do you feel comfortable with our Speaker of the House picking conservative legislators
But see-
to go represent us?
But see, you should ask that question to the people that are electing the Speaker of the House out of that district.
I'm just asking you, as governor, would you
That's-
feel comfortable?
That's the guy that I call a political traitor, so obviously I don't.
Okay,
But the only way that you remove him out of that position is the people that elected him to that position.
I understand.
Elections have consequences, and hopefully the people down there in the Beaumont, Texas area will do better.
So one quick final question here. Do you think in selecting a speaker that a secret ballot would be better than a roll call type ballot?
I think it should be open for everyone to know and to see. I
Okay.
think that we should have it so that if we have a Republican majority, that Republican majority should be selecting the speaker. Not you get a certain group of Republicans and then you go get the majority of Democrats to do it and say that now I have a block. No, that's not what we want.
Well, how's it working so far? It's unanimously bad, in the last 3 speakers. Maybe we should
Yes.
try something a little
Strauss,
different.
Bonner, and now Phelan.
Yeah,
But coming back, who elects them?
agreed. We only have control over one though.
Yeah.
Typically, albeit not much control. Anyway, that wraps up the Q&A. If you want to take up to 5 minutes on your closing, and then we'll call it a wrap.
Well, again, it's a pleasure and an honor to sit here and be with you all, and this is what any elected official is supposed to do, make himself accountable to people. It's just the same as when you're a commander in the military, you don't sit back in your office and have a block or a wall between you and your soldiers. You're supposed to be out there and hearing their thoughts, perspectives, concerns. You still have to be the repository of the final decision, but you need to understand that that's what leadership is about, taking a diverse group of people and getting them focused on the accomplishment of a singular goal. So I just appreciate being here with you all, and I wish you all a very Merry Christmas. And, I want people to understand, as Benjamin Franklin told Benjamin Franklin told Mrs. Powell, that it's a republic if you can keep it. And we need to get engaged. We need to get involved. We need to be part of this process. Early voting is going to start the 14th of February. Voter registration ends the 31st of January. There's still people that are running around Texas, don't know that there's a primary that's about to start on the 1st of March. They don't know.
Nope.
And so therefore, that's why you get a Dave Phelan. That's why you get a Strauss or a Bonner or some of these other things that are going on. There's a core group of people that are engaged and involved, but there are a lot of mindless lemmings out there. And don't be a mindless lemming.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank
it,
you.
and
My
good luck in your campaign.
Thanks, sir. Thank y'all.
You
ma'am.
bet. Thank you.